This is the Two Lights Podcast. Join me, Robert Nicolato, and my wife, Crystal Nicolato, as we explore the words and principles of the truth that illuminate the direction and the steps on the path of life. Good morning, sweetie.
Good morning.
It's been a while.
It has been a while. It's nice to be back.
Yeah, so it's been about 2 weeks?
I guess so. It's felt like forever.
Yeah, we've missed 2 episodes, and we had some really good reasons for that.
That's good. I was wondering.
It almost didn't feel like it ought to be that way. I think that's what is so destabilizing about craziness like this. Obviously because it's so rare and different.
Right.
To have COVID-19 ourselves.
Right.
And then within the same week to have my dad die of COVID-19. And then within the same week, I accepted a new position at a different job. And both me and you were sick. All of our kids were not sick. So that meant when you were not sleeping and miserable, and their schedule had not changed.
Right.
And so here we are just trying to
survive.
Not die.
And they're running around having fun.
Yeah. What's wrong, Mom? What's wrong, Dad? It's like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was just, to call it the COVID Hell Week would be just not even inaccurate at all.
Right.
The last time I saw my dad was him at the doorway. We knew he was sick, but he had given us no indication that it was anything more than a cold.
Right.
And so we had brought him some chicken soup, and I just, dropped it off for him. Mm-hmm. And he just disappeared into the house. Mm-hmm. And that was the last time I saw him.
Right.
I suppose I think about that. It's like, what would you have done differently?
Right.
I mean, with the information that I had at the time,
nothing.
There was nothing to do.
Right.
So I look back on stuff like that and I consider it. But the worst thing I think I could do would be to regret.
Right, because like you said, what would you have done?
Right. Could there have been something that I've done? Of course. There is a million things that the path of a person can take.
But it's difficult when you're dealing with another adult, because I thought about that too, If we had more information, what would we have done? Well, we only would have done what your dad would have allowed.
That's true.
And so at the end of the day, again, we could have only done what he would have followed through with for himself.
Right. That was kind of his MO also, would be to kind of hide until everything's white as rain. And then we would find out about what happened.
So he was
after.
Consistent.
Yeah.
And, we couldn't have forced him to do anything other than what he would have agreed to.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about too when you think,
Yep.
I was thinking about that yesterday. Man, if we had known, we could have done this, we could have done that. But that's all dependent on your dad following through with anything we would have done.
Right. And it's, the possibility of him resenting it the whole way and fighting you.
Yeah, and being alive and then being angry.
Right. Well, and then maybe the last things that you are doing with your father before he dies is that you're at war with him.
Right, which it's impossible to be at war with your dad, first of all, because he's so nice and chill.
Yeah, I mean...
But passive-aggressive
exactly.
war of your dad being annoyed.
Yeah.
Really, he passed away just like he lived his life.
Yeah.
Just like, I don't know what the word is, but he was consistent.
Yes.
For better or worse, he passed away like he lived.
Yeah.
Which was it is what
just
it
like
is.
Dad would have done it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So true. And I mean, he had fun with his grandkids. We were not living our lives in a manner that was so restrictive because of COVID-19 that there were
no interactions in the last year.
So, I mean, he got to see his grandkids every week, and he loved it. You know, he would, on Sundays, we would all
go to church
together, and we would rest together. And
he'd take his nap downstairs. We'd take our naps upstairs.
Yeah. And so he'd hear the pitter-patter of our little kids running around after a nap, and they would always wake him up. And he said, you know, he said that it's my favorite time of the week is with you guys. And he said that over and over and over again. And I don't regret that.
And I think too, going back to the beginning, that was really only possible because we took your dad on his terms.
Yes. Yeah.
Because your dad, I don't know, it just ties back into his death too. Like, he had his own terms.
Mm.
It makes it sound like he's like so stubborn. He was stubborn in a strange way.
Mm.
You would never outright peg him as stubborn, ever.
Mm.
But it was just this undertone.
Mm.
And it's just like, we took him on his terms, and that made our relationship really sweet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not ideal, but it made it possible, and it made it good.
Right. Right. Yeah, we could have made demands on him. I mean, anyone can, but we didn't. And I suppose it for our listeners who aren't more familiar with the circumstances, I suppose it makes sense to that the Lord did have mercy on us in one respect, in that Dad had caught COVID-19 from somewhere other than here.
Right.
He caught it somewhere. We don't know where. And then we caught it from him.
Right.
And so I'm grateful for that order. I am grateful for that. You know, how would this have been different if, you know, he had caught it from us? Like, well, if that was the case, actually, we probably would have been more on alert to his symptoms.
Right, because we would have known he had it.
Right. So, I mean, maybe that would have been a blessing. I don't know. But, and again, that's just one of those things where it's like, well, God knows.
But, you know, you think about it now, and I'm like, why on earth would I think that? Your dad had all of these underlying health conditions.
Yeah.
Like, why on earth I thought him getting it would be no big deal, I have no idea. Thinking about it now, I'm like, what on earth? But yet, that's just, again, just one of those things.
Yeah. Well, people with his conditions totally survive COVID.
But a lot of times.
But if it's going to get you, those,
that's who's
he had what you needed in order for it to get you.
Right. So I'm like, I don't know why I was never really calculating that with your dad. I guess, again, what would I have done?
Yeah, well, he wasn't
I would have wanted him to be healthy.
Yeah.
And if he wasn't going to take care of himself, then we would have done what we've done, which is just see him.
Yeah. He
sees the kids, and I can't force him.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I would have done, would have him be more healthy. But that has nothing to do with me.
It's totally out of your control.
Yeah. So there's nothing different.
That's not within your sphere of responsibility.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, it's one of those things where you kind of have to let God. And one of my favorite verses on the whole planet is found in 1 Peter chapter 4:19. It says, "Wherefore let them that suffer according to the will of God commit the keeping of their souls to him in well-doing as unto a faithful Creator." And so, I mean, as it relates to my dad, as it relates to us, as it relates to how there's a hole that got left by Dad in our family. Mm-hmm. And, this last Sunday was strange.
Right.
It was strange not having Dad here,
Yeah, he's like an anchor.
Yeah.
Of our Sundays.
Yeah. And I mean, we did that on purpose, because of the amount of time we spent with Dad. It gets down in you more. The fact that he's not here.
Right. You don't even realize it.
Yeah. And so I remember actually even before we were married, that's actually the consequence of relationship is that there's going to be a loss someday.
Right. Which is a miracle that either of us got married then. Because I'm like, it's really amazing.
Yeah.
That people are willing to do that, knowing that.
Yeah.
Especially people with anxiety problems.
No, it's true.
It's really a miracle.
Yeah.
And that's, you and I were talking about that, about having kids.
Yeah.
Or having a lot of kids. And I feel like that's a big thing people point out, or people object to, about having so many kids. I have a really good friend. She's one of my best friends. She has 6 kids. And her husband owns his own company with his brothers.
Yeah.
And they had an employee, a younger guy. And he said to my friend's husband, how can you be married with 6 kids? It's so permanent.
Right.
He, was engaged for like a decade and they were never married and whatever. And he couldn't get over the permanence of what my friend's husband had done.
Right.
Not only was he married, he had 6 kids and he could never get away from his wife now, even if he wanted, because they're intrinsically connected.
Right.
Because of the amount of kids.
Right.
It's just really permanent.
Right.
And I thought, and that was so interesting. And my friend's husband said, that's the whole point. That's why I did it. I wanted it to be permanent, and now it is.
Right.
And it's like, it's true. It's, your heart is divided over so many things now, and it's so much responsibility. And when you're sick and you want to rest, and there's 4 reasons why you absolutely cannot, it's a lot of work.
Right.
And you think, wow, you think back to the days you had 1 kid and you think, my brain dwelt at peace.
Yeah.
More. I wasn't worried. I wasn't up at night anxious. I wasn't, I had 1 manageable child and I could manage it on my own.
Right.
But then you see your kids and they tell you they love you and they run around the house in their little diapers.
Yeah.
With their feet pitter-pattering.
Yeah.
And they look at you and they hug you. And you know that you've made a judgment call. And you've said that those things are worth the risk.
Right.
But you're just aware, though, it's a judgment call. Yeah. I've determined the risk and the pain that I'll feel at separation is worth the connection now.
Right. Right. And I mean, being human, I think that's intrinsic. And people that deny that and fill it up with maybe animals or dogs as if that's the same thing, to seriously look at that premise,
I mean, yeah, I've had someone say, I like dogs more than people because dogs won't hurt me.
Right.
And that's like
right.
mind blowing.
Right.
To really consider the weight of that.
Yeah.
But that comes from a place of being hurt.
Right.
Clearly. And then saying, I want the connection.
Right.
But I don't want the emotional burden. Except when their dog dies there.
Right.
Well,
I think the scales change. So like the dog, it's like sad 10, happy 10. Whereas when you've got kids, that temperature swing is more extreme. So the suffering can be worse because of relationship.
Right.
But the joy can be just as awesome.
That's so true.
So that spectrum changes.
Which I think people are saying, why would you want those extremes?
Right.
Like the coworker of my friend's husband. Like, why would you subject yourself to those sorts of extremes? But you can't really explain it. without experience. It's hard to explain to somebody who's never understood the joy of having so many kids.
Well, why do people like extreme sports? Like bungee jumping, this extreme,
right?
Fear, where your whole body's just physically put into a situation where it's like, it's an extreme. And
right.
what about that is something that you don't forget?
It's just have kids somehow, and I don't even know how we got on the topic of kids right now. It's not necessarily what we're talking about. They just get put.
What's the relationship?
Yes,
thing?
They get put in another category.
Yeah. Well, to me, it's the same. It's extreme life. There's more risk intrinsically, and so therefore there's more reward.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking about that this morning because, I look at the world, I look at the future, and I'm like, I'm done having kids. I can't. I can't subject my anxiety levels to more when I look at the future. And yet I'm also like, of course I can. Of course I will. Because there's so much risk and reward. Having a lot of kids, there's nothing else on the planet like it. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah.
There's so much purpose. And even the risk fuels the purpose.
Yes.
And it sounds so dumb, and I can't believe it's so outside of my normal thinking. I am not a risk taker, but yet there's just part of you that's like, that's what you're supposed to do.
Right.
I don't know.
So here's the question then. Is risking the COVID-19 and relationships? Because there's a risk there, right?
Yeah, and honestly, what's been one of the most challenging things about your dad dying is feeling judgment.
Yes.
That has been surprising and unexpected.
Yeah.
That's specific to COVID-19 deaths.
Yeah.
Is feeling judgment from people.
Yeah.
People that have outright said things and people that have implied things.
Right.
Because some people haven't seen their parents in a year.
Right.
Haven't hugged, haven't kissed, haven't gotten close to their parents in a year or more.
Right.
And that's been a duty they felt, and like, I'm doing a good thing.
Right.
For my parents' sake. And it's been my duty.
Yeah.
And so they feel morally good about that.
Yeah.
And that is what it is. It's just that. So when they see what we've done.
Yeah.
It looks like we've been reckless.
Uh-huh.
And then there's this sort of judgment about like, oh, well, that's what reckless people get.
Right.
That has made me so angry. And I've really had to take those feelings to the Lord because it's made me upset. And it's like, well, why has it made me upset? Maybe because I feel some guilt in the way we handled it. Not that your dad was cautious. Your dad was actually quite cautious. He would see us, but he was cautious.
Right.
But maybe I feel some guilt or some regret, like we were talking about. In, again, I don't know.
Well, I think kind of the theme is like, well, relationships are risky. Life is risky.
And this just...
Everyone has to put on a scale the risk versus reward.
Right. And what if your parent died? Because they can die from other things.
Right.
And you didn't see them for the last year.
Right.
And they still died anyway.
Yeah. No, that's... Because there's such thing as heart attacks.
Right.
There's such things as you spent so much time hiding from this that your body in other ways broke down.
Right. You're not getting out. You're not getting vitamin D. You're not getting exercise.
So like, what do they call that? There's, it's it's like a spectrum of life, quality of life, right?
Right. Like, because the suicide rate, people are like, right. So you're not being risky in one category and the other. You're not being foolish. Like, it doesn't exist.
Right.
And people don't die.
Right.
We just got really sick and your dad just died.
Yeah.
So you're not being so foolish to where you're being reckless.
Yeah.
But you're also a human who needs relationship.
Right. Right. And I mean, I could I mean, when you look at it 2020, what Dad said, oh yeah, I would have like, you know, I'm glad I'm gone. Right. No, of course not. Right.
But, you know, honestly, I was thinking about your dad and I'm like, would he have changed anything?
No.
Even knowing he would die?
Yeah.
And I think he probably wouldn't have.
Yeah. Well, I know
he might not have the capacity. He might literally not have had the capacity.
Yeah.
Just because of the way your dad was.
Yeah.
I thought about that. Like, if he knew I'm going to die, you know.
Right. Yeah, and I can't think of a worse thing for the living to do to each other than to swoop in with their own moral scruples about a thing and have an opinion.
Oh, man, dude. I've had to guard my attitude because I want to knock some blocks off.
So they have the right to do that for themselves.
Yes.
And I don't want to be so progressive to say though that, you know, you really ought to evaluate the risks that you are taking by not having a real life that is locked down by COVID-19.
We have to be confident, you know, why does that make me upset? Am I not confident in the choices we made? And I need to be okay with, by taking risk, or whatever we took by just having a normal relationship.
Walking out the door in this world is risky.
But I mean, we invite criticism.
Yeah.
From certain people.
Right.
By doing what we did.
Yep.
And certain people think, you know, oh wow. But the irony of that is your dad was an adult. Yeah. So at the end of the day, even if people said to us, you know, you're reckless for taking your dad to church every week. No one took your dad anywhere. He was an able-bodied adult.
Yeah.
He could have said, I'm never coming. I'm never going.
Yeah.
And we would have loved him anyway.
Yeah.
So it's as if people think we had some ability to influence your dad outside of his adulthood.
Yeah. Well, it would be us mothering him. It'd be like, so we're going to helicopter an adult?
Yeah, he made all of his choices. Yeah. He just participated in life. So it has nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
But people, I think, project it on us like we ought to know better.
Right.
But again, it was his health.
Mm-hmm.
It had nothing to do with us.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to remind myself that and not use that as a weapon against other people too.
Right. Yeah. So there was something that you had mentioned earlier today about surrender.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about that.
I guess I was just, you know, seeing your dad pass away so quickly, just realizing that God is so sovereign over death.
Mm-hmm.
And that there's nothing, you know, even if you're sick and you get well or you're sick and you get healed, eventually death comes and there's absolutely nothing you can do to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was reading today in several different places, but one of them was in Psalms where David was saying, don't be like the donkey that God has to yank with a bridle and a bit to come, you know? And because God's telling people to come, so either you're going to get yanked or you're going to go willingly.
Right.
And I get this third belief that surely there's another option. Surely there's a third solution, which is if I don't surrender, I don't have to go.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just realizing you're going to go. How are you going to go?
Mm-hmm. I think that's what I liked about that verse from Peter too, is that to give God his Godhead, you talked about that there was a peace in that.
Yeah, because you become like a baby or like a child, like the Bible says, childlike faith.
Yeah.
Because you just are accepting from the hand of God what he gives.
Right.
And that's what I think, especially with this coronavirus, that this whole topic here of relationships and the sovereignty of God and accepting things from God's hands, it's so foreign to people in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why they see us having a lot of kids and they think, oh, it's reckless. Look at the future.
Right.
You're being reckless. Or they see us spending normal quality time with your dad. It's like, oh, you're being reckless.
Mm.
They see these things that we think are normal as reckless and irresponsible.
Right.
They don't understand.
Mm.
And so, they're not looking to God and accepting things from his hand. They're micromanaging. Everyone thinks they have control over their life.
Right.
And so to live a life of faith and say, I'm trusting you, God, with my kids. I'm trusting you, God, with my relationships, with my health.
Right.
I'm not being reckless, but I'm not going to control my life to such a degree to where I think I can keep myself avoiding death.
Right.
I mean, I want to be thoughtful over my health. But if I'm going to die, I'm going to die.
Mm.
There's risk in cars. There's risks in going to the grocery store and getting shot. I mean, there's literally, you and I have been talking about this, living life right now in 2021 feels riskier than it's felt any other year.
Mm.
People are nuts.
Mm.
People are insane.
Well, as it goes, though, in the scope of life in history,
It's true.
it's the most ridiculous notion for us to think that we are in more danger living to 80 years old than at any other point in history.
You know what I'm saying, though? It's like, life is clearly risky. I mean, you look at the news and you're like, oh my word. I mean, can I go anywhere without running into a crazy?
Right.
My odds increase daily.
Right.
And so people somehow put this coronavirus in a different category as if we're not taking risk. And then they try to take the risk out of life.
Yeah.
And they take the joy out.
Yes.
But then they look at us with our kids or whatever and it's like not computing.
Yeah.
Because it's so rare to live life right now.
Right.
It's really rare.
Right. Well, and our response to this sickness is unprecedented in history. There's no scientific what's going to happen down the line by having treated it just like this.
Right.
So, I mean, the stunting of life in order to preserve life existentially does not make sense to me.
Right. And we're even having to evaluate, our own. Everyone's learning. We're all evaluating how we're handling it.
Right. Yes. That's true. It's like this isn't. Each individual has to bring their life into the thought and make a decision. In order to preserve yourself from death, if you end up not living a life, what have you gained? Right,
which is really what it comes down to. What's my perspective here on what life means?
Right.
On the meaning of what is life? Is it breathing or is it living?
Right.
And you obviously want both, right?
Right.
But it's not just one or the other. It's really not. Right. It's living and breathing.
Yes. And I feel like as Dad's legacy is concerned, his last year with us, it was actually last 3 years, where we were able to just have fun with him. We played games, board games.
Many.
We'd have coffee. We would sit out on the balcony. We would talk. We would, we'd go to Greenfield Village, Henry Ford Museum. We went to Frankenmuth. Disney World. All these things that, there's this huge stack of memories in life that we can look back on, and there is no regret. Right. We spent, outside of any other relationship, more time with my dad.
Bar none.
Yeah. And so there's and I guess I've been trying to evaluate my own heart in terms of how I feel, because I haven't really been sad, at the loss yet. I think it's because there was so much life there.
Right.
I mean, there might be a bit of PTSD going on here because of having gotten it when he died myself.
Right. No, it's scarring.
So
yeah,
there's some of that there, and how much of that I can actually parse myself is actually
difficult to.
It's hard to say. I mean,
right.
I'm complicated to myself,
yeah,
let alone
we're
looking
sick,
at other people.
And he passes away, and we're still sick, and it's like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
is that going to be me? Oh my gosh,
right. So I don't know. I really feel like we did things the absolute perfect way that we could have done them
with the information we had.
With the information we had, and it made it something that I'm not looking back on and am unhappy about.
Right.
Because I can't do it over. And
like we said, I mean, we could change our behavior, but your dad, it would have still been so dependent on him.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So even if we could do it over, it doesn't mean he would do it over.
Right. Yeah, and that's been a part of the decision-making process in all of this that I felt was something that the Lord's been teaching me personally. And you asked me about this morning, and it was good. It was a good thought, I felt, that we've talked about this idea of the sphere of responsibility.
Right.
Where the intersection between purpose and meaning and my responsibilities all lie. Mm-hmm. That when God created us, He created us with inbuilt purpose.
Right.
When we are operating within that purpose, there's meaning. And like a given tool has inbuilt characteristics like a hammer, where, it's designed for hammering. It's not designed for the work of a screwdriver.
Right.
And because of that, when it's operating according to its purpose, that's where the meaning comes out.
Right, and to hijack that.
You see the design.
Like we were talking about with the dogs.
Yeah.
Like it misses it.
Yes. And so when I'm coming to a decision, there's a certain amount of information that is built into a decision that can tie all the way back to a purpose that God made for me.
Right.
So something simple like that seems disconnected would be like, we've talked about this a few podcasts ago, about we needed to put in a privacy. We wanted to have privacy between us and the road. Mm-hmm. Well, we have, money limitations. We have time limitations. Yeah. And so we just, with the information that we had, what's the purpose of it? Okay, the purpose of it is so that we can have a little bit more of a private yard. So you feel a little bit safer. The kids have a little bit,
can go out there more without me. And
there's just a little bit more containment there. Mm-hmm. And we want it to look nice. Let's add that into it while we're there. So we could just put up a fence.
Right.
That's kind of expensive. If I have someone else do
expensive.
it, I could do it myself because I've done it before.
Right.
But that would be my time. That would also be
and
quote,
material
unquote, expensive. Oh yeah, wood is off the chain right now for cost. So over the process of time, we set a budget, which is so we set hard limits.
And we didn't even like fences.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
And like everybody in their pet duck puts up a certain type of plant that's fast growing up here in Michigan. And when it came down to it,
we didn't even like that.
We didn't like that either.
Right.
And so we're like, oh, maybe we'll put in holly bushes, maybe we'll do this, maybe we'll do that. And the process of actually getting to the thing that was meaningful wasn't immediate.
Right.
So we set all these parameters, and as the information unfolded, and I guess that's what I'm getting at. To wait. Get the information that you have. If it doesn't feel like it's fitting the meaning, wait.
And that even reminds me of now, we've worked really, really hard on our yard this year.
Yeah.
Not spending tons of money, but tons of time.
Yeah.
We literally ripped up half our yard, made it into a garden.
Yeah.
We've been working really hard. And now that you have this new job that's farther away, if this is the job for you, like in a few months, we're going to move.
Yeah.
And so I've been asking myself, did we just waste 6 months of our life? And I was asking you, was this a waste?
Yeah. Was
this privacy? These bushes we planted, these things we worked so hard on, was that a waste?
Yeah.
Were these plants a waste? I don't even know if it adds value. And we just spent so much of our life on this.
Yeah.
So looking back and asking yourself, is it a waste if the end is just that we did it? Right.
I mean, the process of coming to what we just are delighting in, like, I was laughing with someone about it yesterday, where it's like, so we ended up planting blueberry bushes for our hedgerow, which is so oddball. But I mean, the soil's perfect for it. The
price was amazing.
Yeah, the bushes themselves showed up like within hours, and it was just. And then when you mentioned it to me, it was like, of course,
right?
It was like, and then the actual berm that we put in was a natural stone berm of just stacked boulder. And it looks so neat, and it's beautiful, and it's so hard to explain what that does to me, to have come from, we could just get it done, and it would be done.
And people say that, like I met people and they were like, is this your forever home?
Yeah.
Using the keywords people use, because they see the particular investment of time, not money. They see the particular investment of time we've made in this house.
Right.
And they wonder, if you're not going to live here forever, why would you do that? Right. It's a waste.
Well, it ends up being, to me, like an artist, where you're painting something.
The process really matters.
Yes. And it's because it's, I don't want to go too deep into the spiritual, but it ends up being a spiritual thing, because we are spiritual creatures.
Right. It's just something really to think about, though, that I've been thinking about, all the investment we've made in this house.
Yeah.
To just leave it. It's like, what did we do?
Yeah.
What have we been doing for the last 5 years of our life?
Yeah.
Because some people don't do anything to their house, then they sell it. And then they fix it up when they're going to sell it.
Yeah.
And do all the things they've never done on it.
Right.
And it's like, that's clearly not what we've done. Right. And so it's like, was that?
Well, that's actually impossible. If you're going to be doing something like an artist, you're doing it
all the time.
Oh, all the time. And it's a process. It's not just something you do in a month.
But I feel like that's a rare perspective, because somebody else said that they started their seeds indoors and it never worked out. They'd put them outside and they'd all die.
Yeah.
And so then they were like, forget it. That was a waste. I'm going to buy plants.
Yeah.
And I thought about it, and I thought, would I think it was a waste if that happened to me?
Right.
And I didn't think I would, because of the process of doing the seeds. Like, what else would I be doing with my time?
Right.
Like, it was useful for me to do that as opposed to be on my phone. So even if they all die, did I waste 6 months of really hard work doing my seeds?
Right.
And I thought, no, because I learned a lot.
Right.
Saved me from doing other dumb stuff.
Right.
And was my point to just have plant? What was my end goal?
Yeah.
Is, I think, a really good question.
Yeah.
Was it to have a plant, or was it to learn?
Yeah.
Also, like, there's multiple goals.
Yeah. 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 And notice what happened too. So initially, after my dad died, what got neglected?
The garden.
The garden.
It felt perilous, because before, every day I'm like on top of it.
Yeah.
But I was just like, not even.
It's because something, it actually did show you that though the plants in the garden is important to us as a family, there are actually things that are bigger.
Oh, yeah.
That if it came right down to
they'd be dead in a heartbeat.
You chop that turkey off.
Yeah, it wouldn't even be a thing.
But, as our bodies started to recover,
we go back.
And as, our sphere of responsibility started to come back, because it really got paralyzed for about a week.
Yeah, our house, like, we were just keeping up.
Yes.
Like, our house was trashed, but it was like just manageable.
Yeah. Oh man, I thought about this, like the first 3 nights of us having the coronavirus was rough. Mm-hmm. Sleeping was
horrible.
Not good.
We were like sweating to death.
I know. And I was like, you know what? We need to reinstitute the bedpan. Because one of the things is, you need to drink water.
Right.
And so you end up getting up 50 times a night, go to the bathroom.
And you're like sweating. So.
Yeah. It was horrible. I'm like, bedpan.
Going old school.
Oh man. So yeah, I thought about that. But I mean, the fever and it was so destabilizing.
Night's the worst.
Yeah. But then when things finally started coming back around, as soon as we had, enough sleep and energy for it, I was like, all right, we need to wrap some of this stuff up. Because I think getting back to, it's not forgetting, it's integrating this into normal.
Yes.
It's when you pretend like this existentially changes you.
Right.
It actually doesn't.
Right.
Does it affect you? Absolutely. But
at some point it has to be brought along
right
with your responsibilities.
Right. And I think that's going to help us actually even deconstruct the fact that Dad's gone, and that that's all going to be a part of the process.
Right.
So even us being, podcasting today, this is a part of us bringing back to normal.
Right, which I really have wanted to do.
Yes, yeah. So I'm so glad that we got time today. We made time today. It was no accident.
Right.
We were up at the crack of dawn.
Yeah, it's funny. So often I'm like, oh man, the podcast is so much work, but I'm like, I need the podcast. I need to feel like my week is normal.
Yeah.
It definitely anchors every week. Without it, I'm like, no, this needs to happen.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I'm so thankful for you.
Yeah.
So thankful we're friends.
Yeah.
And that we can do this together.
Yeah.
It's really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, prayer has been a big part of this. So many people have been praying for us.
So thankful.
We've had people bring us meals.
People pay for our medicine.
People
pay for our medicine.
Yeah.
It was really expensive.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, people that we especially know have sacrificed tremendously.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? It's not like it was no big deal to write a check.
Right.
These are people that work really hard.
Yeah, and they were digging.
Were digging.
It was just like, wow, you guys are so generous.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how could you ever pay that back? Because we could write them a check, but a check would not cover the sacrifice they really made.
Right.
Because it wasn't just monetary.
Right.
The sacrifice,
timing,
it was just...
the relationship.
Just can't repay that.
Yeah.
It's humbling.
Yeah.
Because I know money can't repay what they've done.
Yeah.
Not really.
Yeah.
That was just a gift.
Yeah.
And I have to just humbly accept it.
Right. Yeah, that's actually one of those things where it's like, I'm going to mark that down in my book. And it's like, Lord, I know there's going to be a time where they're going to need us. And it's like, help me to see that.
And be willing and ready.
And really be able to minister to them the way they've ministered to us.
So true.
Yeah. And I think the Lord will, because life happens, man. Life happens.
It's true. I'm so thankful for the body of Christ. So thankful.
Yeah.
And we had friends over on Sunday for the first time.
Yeah.
In weeks since we've been sick, now that we're out of quarantine.
Yeah.
It's just so good. I love God's people.
Yeah. Yeah.
God's people are special people.
Yeah.
People that really love the Lord. There's just nothing like it.
Yeah. It's so stabilizing. All right. Well, until we talk again.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you for listening to the Two Lights podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and tell your friends. Or email me at twolightspodcast@gmail.com, and we'll add you to our weekly mail list. Additional information about this episode and supporting Two Lights Podcast is in our show notes. And on behalf of the Nicolato family, I thank you.